So today I'd like to welcome Je'anna, who is speaking to us today about self-directed education and lots more. I can't wait to get into it. So welcome Je'anna, welcome to Consciously Connected Conversations.
Wonderful. Thanks, Claire. Good to be here.
So I'm excited to get into the conversation, but to start with, if I can ask you maybe just to kick us off with a little bit of like almost like a, what's it called, elevator pitch of like who you are or where you find yourself right now or anything you want to share with us just to start off with.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a mom, first and foremost. Otherwise, I don't think I would ever be on this journey. But I've also got a background in children's rights. And when I put those two together, I also started looking at education and looking for the optimal kind of education for my brand new baby then. And I registered for an MEd in philosophy of education and quickly found that I wasn't finding anything. So then I had to go on a journey. So that's really taken me to a place now where, 20 odd years later, I'm running courses for people in facilitation of self-directed education for parents, for people running democratic schools, Sudbury schools, various kinds of SDE communities and startups, and specializing in also pathological demand avoidance because SDE is perfect for that. That's really what I do now. And my human rights focus is still very, very strong. So I was a co-founder of the Right-Centric Education Network, and I'm still very involved there in a general way internationally and in a more targeted way here locally in South Africa. And and I've written a couple of books on these subjects that are out there as well. What else would you like to know?
No, that sounds good. It's kind of touching on all the things that we're going to hopefully expand
Yeah,
on. So yeah, that's exciting. Okay, cool. So I like find myself as you talk, I'm like, oh, I wanted to ask about that. Oh, but let me slow down. So for those who
yeah.
don't know, can you tell us, like layman's terms, what would you describe, like, let's say self-directed education or anything in that sort of realm? What would you describe that as? Yeah. Or what it isn't or what it
Yeah.
is, whatever you want to tell us. Yeah.
That's quite important because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. And really what it is looking at the person who's doing the learning is in charge of the learning and in charge of how the learning happens, when, in what way, with who. So it doesn't necessarily mean learning on your own. It can. It can mean going to a public school, right? The point is that the person who's doing the learning is the one who's actually making the choices according to their own needs and their own inner drive. And then the people around them are supporting that, and they might give them guidance, for example, and various kinds of scaffolding or support. The person who's doing the learning might even, ask to be taught. But the real point is it's not being imposed on them by somebody else who thinks that something's for their own good. They are really the authority about what needs to happen in their lives. So it's very much about including the child's sovereignty,
Yeah.
if you like, that nobody else can live my life. Nobody else can really make my choices. So that's really the bottom line.
I actually love that you said that this week, particularly, because I've been working with my kids unschooling, and I keep going on this
Mhm.
track of like, we need to get away from school stuff. And my daughter is asking for school stuff. And I'm like, but we're unschooling. You don't have to do this. And she's like, but I want to. And I keep having to remind myself, that's okay too. Like, that's okay. Like, that's your journey. That's what you choose. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Another big moment for me. So then something I'm really excited to ask about, just because if I lived closer, I would have wanted to send my kids to Riverstone Village while it was
Mhm.
in its running phase. So could you tell us a little bit about Riverstone Village, like how it started, how it was run, and sort of what happened after that?
Yeah, great. So when my first son was very, very small, I started discovering my first unschoolers that I met. And I was very inspired, and I started reading and looking up, and I thought, well, this is great, but I could still see the real advantage of having like a community and a space that's dedicated to the kids where they can also extend beyond their own parents and, sort of have more resources. So we actually my co-founder at Riverstone Village and myself, we actually co-founded something when my son was like 1.5 years old, out on a plot on a farm in a little tiny cottage, and that lasted about a year. And we didn't know what we were doing at that point. We just hired a Montessori teacher and said, don't teach anyone anything unless they ask. All the kids were really young. And the families, we took it on ourselves to bring something interesting, one thing interesting every day, because it was literally an empty cottage. There wasn't a chair in it. It was just an empty cottage. The stove worked. So we would do things like bring ingredients to make bread, and then the kids would play with the dough for 2 hours before we baked it. And of course, there was also lots of outdoor space and nature space. So that ran about a year, but we couldn't get enough families out there to sustain it. It was too far out of town. And then we went on a long journey, stopping and starting and running part-time stuff and home education, social gatherings, and a couple of other attempts that we were learning all along the way. And somewhere along the way, I managed to finally stumble across Sudbury Valley School. And I think the first one I read was maybe Free at Last, which was just, oh, wow, okay, I've found it. I found it. I don't have to invent it. We just have to make some adjustments for our particular circumstances. So then we set about seriously trying to found. We had wanted a residential community where the kids would free range, but we eventually just realized our kids were getting older and this wasn't happening. So in 2017, I think, we got a couple of families together that were keen on this, that had been in this founding group, discussing the philosophy and getting on the same page. We said, okay, if we all put our money together, what have we got? And it was rather pitiful. But we said, let's have a look at the scout halls. And we found a beautiful scout hall with a lovely outdoor space that kind of needed some money for some upgrades. And we said, look, it's sitting empty 4 days a week. How about we pay you what we've got? And we come in 4 days a week. And they were perfectly happy with that. And of course, once there was a place, then people got interested. So within a few months, we had enough money to then go and rent a basic property that we could also then fix up. And that was the start of Riverstone Village, which was beautiful. And, 8 years on, we closed it, which is also a long, long story, because it's not very easy to run in South Africa, especially if you have a zero bottom sliding scale on your fees, because inclusion was really important for us. Part of the point of having a learning community is that the kids can experience a variety of people and backgrounds and socioeconomic status and things like that. And it was very stunning while it was going. And then, I think it ended at the right time for me personally, because my training work and my advocacy work is just getting to be more and more of my time. And I do also need some time for myself and my family. So, that's what I'm keeping busy with now, is taking all the lessons that I learned at Riverstone and putting them into courses and writings and, sharing those lessons so that they can actually benefit more people than just, one small group of families.
Yeah, sure. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot, because a lot of people have asked me, like, can I run a school? Because they want to see how like unschooling is done or self-directed education. But I think it feels, maybe you can see from your perspective, it feels like more families need to know how to do it for themselves so that it can spread more. I mean, it's like you say, it's not easy to run it as a one place, because I mean you can only also take so many kids. It's not going to really always spread that way. I think what I'd like to ask, because we're on this, I'm actually going to jump ahead a bit from what I'd planned, but like the legal implications, or the, in terms of the South African Education Department, or however we want to talk about it, but from your perspective, now that you've run the Riverstone Village and you're in the community and you're seeing what's happening, where does it sit? Because a lot of people ask me, well, what if you get found out? And I mean, we've registered with the Pestalozzi Trust. So like if you can give us an idea of that, that realm of thinking.
Yeah, so it's really tricky in South Africa. What one has to understand about a government education department is that it's this enormous bureaucratic structure that has to function. And particularly in South Africa, I mean, I really feel for them because they've got such a hard time just trying to do the basics of the main thing that they really, really need to do. I mean, they're still trying to get rid of the pit toilets. They're still trying to make sure there's textbooks and desks and not, even a roof on some of these schools. So for them to prioritize making it possible for this smallish niche group where the kids are basically already sorted is understandably not a very big priority. So the one thing to understand is that it is not illegal. It is just not regulated because they haven't kind of gotten around to making space for us. So the new guidelines for home education assessment are very, very nice for the people. You see, unschooling is also a very, very big umbrella. A lot of people mean different things when they say unschooling. So that those new regulations, well, they're not regulations yet. At the moment, it's guidelines to the provincial education departments on what assessment is. And those are really, really nice and broad this time. It's quite encouraging. They're saying things like portfolios are great and, it's sort of really loosening up on the idea of having to have a very strict, rigid adherence to exactly what happens in the mainstream school system. But it still doesn't really take into account actual, real self-directed education or actual, real, solidly rights-centric perspectives in a family. It still looks at the parent being the one who makes the choices. And it still looks at wanting to keep par with one's grade or phase, which just isn't how things go when people learn according to their own timelines. I mean, it's very, very common to see kids, sort of spanning a number of what would be grades if we had to peg them down. This particular learning area is screeching ahead and that one they'll get to later because they're busy with the other one. So it's not regulated. Where we are is we are in active dialogue with the ministry, particularly is very open-minded at this point because we've got a great minister in there right now who's actually got a philosophy degree and can understand where we're coming from, which wasn't always the case before. But it's not going to be quick because law takes a long time to make. If we look at the dreadful Bella Bill, that was so many years in the making. So it's going to be a little while before the law can change. So we are trying to figure out a kind of a win-win space we can slot in. But I think the important thing to realize is that I don't think the department has the desire or the capacity to come and witch hunt for the sake of it. There are other countries in the world that are much more difficult to practice in because they have the resources and the ideological determination to come and ring your doorbell and find out what you're doing and maybe take a child away. The main problem in South Africa is extended family custody cases, etc. If you're going to do self-directed education in South Africa, you really want to try and make sure that everyone who's a decision maker in that child's life understands what's going down and is comfortable with it. That's really the most important thing. And as you say, registering with the Pestalozzi Trust if you are worried is great. And then, we're also developing some best practice guidelines in the Right-Centric Education Network. And I'm hoping that next year we'll already start rolling out some public free training materials. Because the problem also comes when families don't really know what they're doing or how to do it. Because what our government is concerned about correctly is making sure that children are not neglected. That this isn't an excuse that a parent uses because they just couldn't be bothered or they just feel lost and they don't know what to do. So then the child just, doesn't actually have any educational support. So for me, that's really about making sure that people have the support they need, which is where, getting into a network where people can mentor you and you can get advice and your kids can get friends. And then also, as I say, I'm personally committed to making sure that those materials and that guidance is there. There's already a lot of my stuff is already very around and very affordable. And if anyone really can't afford to buy my book for what online, I don't know what it is, like $4 or something, you know, you can always contact me. I will make a PDF available to you for sure. And there's a load of content free on sites like the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, for example, the Alternative Education Resource Organization, AERO, although that's not all SDE. There's so much available now. If you want to do right by your child, I think you really can.
Yeah, wow. And even as you're saying that, I mean, we've been unschooling our own way for about 2 years almost, and I
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard of all of the things you've just said. So I'm also like, I
Yeah,
want to go look those up now because I do think empowering myself is like the first step. If I'm like learning and learning and unlearning my own schooling, it helps my kids in the long run. I think I've
100%.
got all these things I want to ask, but the one I wanted to ask, branching off a little bit, is
Mm-hmm.
from your work now and your advocacy. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
something I'm like hoping to hear an answer. Are you seeing more shifts in the community? Like, are you seeing more people like light bulb moments, realizing the
Mm-hmm.
value of child-centered education? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think it's shifting enormously. I see a lot of frustration because people still feel very isolated, very alone. And when you're in it and you, especially when you're starting out, it can feel very niche because, you know, everybody else in your neighborhood is in a public school. Everybody else in your extended family is in a private school or whatever. So you can feel very isolated. Whereas now, you know, I've been in this world for 20 years. I've seen the shift. I've seen the change. I've seen the boom. It's booming. And, you know, it reminds me of that chessboard with the rice on the squares. Do you know that story? Where the clever person asks the king to pay him 1 grain of rice for the first square on the chessboard and 2 for the second and 4 for the third. And the king agrees because it sounds like nothing. But then suddenly in those last couple of rows, he finds he doesn't have enough rice in the kingdom. And I think that's what we're seeing with this as more and more parents are realizing, hang on, is it really worth, you know, hoping that my child is going to be in that top 5% in a conventional classroom that we can boast on Facebook and they can get the prize and go to university at this cost to them of their childhood. I mean, our motto for Riverstone Village was, you know, a good education shouldn't cost a childhood. We want our kids to thrive and be happy because that's also how they really, truly develop the foundations for the life skills that they're going to need to thrive. It's no use having 7 A pluses in your matric and you don't actually have the confidence or, you know, any clue how to actually run your own life or make your own choices. So I think a lot of parents are waking up to this, and a lot of kids who are online are waking up to this. They're realizing that not everybody is stuck having to do homework all weekend. And they don't want to do this anymore. They're realizing that they're sitting in class trying to memorize something that they can look up in 2 seconds online. For what
Yeah,
exactly?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that because when you said isolated, I think you hit the nail on the head, even for me. I think that's why I'm doing these podcast interviews.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear more so that I can educate myself, but also get in touch with more people because, I mean, where I live, nobody's unschooling. We have a big homeschool community. Uh,
I'm going to interrupt you right there.
okay.
My co-founder, when I met her, said, nobody in my community is unschooling. And within, like, I think, I don't know, maybe 2 years, I can't remember, she discovered 2 other unschooling families in walking distance from her
Wow.
house,
Okay.
as well as several homeschooling families that were open-minded enough that they could actually socialize.
Okay.
So, you know, you might be right,
It's
maybe,
true. It's
but you
true.
might not.
I might not. It's
Yeah.
true. Maybe I need to
Yeah.
just
So
find the
put
right
your light
kids.
out there, shine.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
remember that people are feeling isolated and nervous about being discovered. So they hide, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that that's what the governments also have to realize, that they're not doing those children a favor. Because if families feel they have to hide, they don't network. The kids don't get friends. The parents don't get mentorship. You've got to make it safe for people to come out and actually, enter networks for best practice. That is the way to prevent neglect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is also so true. Yeah, I think I also do keep my voice quiet because we're in homeschooling circles, but not a lot of people unschooling. So I sort of just keep to
yeah,
myself, and it's better to just
yeah,
be honest. This is what we're doing, and
yeah,
yeah, maybe more people would ask questions. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you for that reminder. Um, I
yeah.
think I also wanted to ask if you don't mind sharing your own personal journey
Mm,
with, you mentioned your son. So did he
yeah.
unschool or like self-directed education journey the whole way through?
The whole way through, because of course, we started our first place when he was 1.5.
Wow.
And then, in between running things, I was still, I knew what I knew pretty fast once I started studying this. So, and he's also quite, he's quite an autodidact. He's not very keen on being taught anything. He likes to research and discover and explore and experiment himself. And the few times he's tried to engage with any kind of curriculum, I mean, he's never bothered with the mainstream curriculum. I'm talking about things like game design or whatever.
Mm,
He's become very frustrated with it very quickly because, it goes in somebody else's sequence.
yeah.
So he has done this the whole way. And it's really been amazing to see what how not just what he's learned, but how mature he's become. I'm kind of a bit daunted. He's sort of at 20, he's sort of where I was, at 40. He gives me business advice and all sorts of stuff, which is really, really great. So yeah, he's currently in what I can only describe as a self-directed tertiary process. Since he graduated from Riverstone at the end of, where are we now? End of 24, he graduated from Riverstone. He majored at Riverstone. We had like a diploma system, completely self-directed, voluntary, optional diploma system. And, he majored in, I'm trying to remember, it was physics, game design, music. I'm trying to remember what else, because it's like when they get to that point in the process, they have to figure out, what am I going to do my final projects in? What am I going to submit? Because the thing people also don't realize is when you're trying to do schoolwork and homework, you have quite limited capacity to do anything else. Maybe you've got a hobby, but the breadth of interest that I saw in these kids in Riverstone was enormous. The number of different things they could thoroughly explore and get mastery in. So yeah, I think he also had coding and 3D modeling, when you create those like 3D, like for example, if you play an online game, all of the assets are 3D modeled by somebody.
Oh, okay.
And a number of the people that gave feedback, because what we used to do at Riverstone Village for the one section of the diploma is we would ask professionals in the field to give feedback on the work submitted. And for himself and a number, in fact, I don't think we had a single graduate that didn't get somebody saying on at least one of their submissions, yeah, this is cool. You can work now,
Wow.
and the graduates have really, they're enjoying their lives,
Yeah.
and they're not going by this very rigid, you go from here to here to here to here.
Yeah.
I think we've got one who has applied to a tertiary institute, a formal tertiary institution so far, and is now studying sports science.
Okay.
And then another who's considering now and is busy scoping out. He's traveling Europe, making money partly by remote coding and partly by picking up odd jobs. And he's scoping out. He went and had a look at a university in Slovakia. He's quite keen on maybe France. But I heard he's also now looking at somewhere else. So he's busy visiting these places to check them out and see if he wants to study at any of them. My son right now is just down in the Cape. He just went to have a look at Stellenbosch on last Saturday. He's going to look at UCT next Saturday. But he's been dead against university this whole time because he says, how long is it going to take me to get something, meaningful? And when we drill into what his interests are, it's like 5 to 7 years. And he's like, what a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And if I look at what he's done since he graduated. You know, he really is doing self-directed tertiary.
Yeah.
I mean, he buttonholed one of the guys at Stellenbosch, and they were having this great discussion on astrophysics. One of the professors, they were having this great discussion about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I think I've just become more and more sold on
Yeah.
this process with every year that goes by, honestly.
And I feel like the children you're speaking about who have done the process are more and more showing us the downfall, or I'm trying to think of the word because I was so like engrossed in what you were saying, I've forgotten my own words, but
Mm,
like it's showing us
mm.
where the what word am I looking for? Not loopholes.
Shortcomings.
Yeah, yeah, like the shortcomings
Yeah,
in
the
the
limitations.
tertiary education system. Because even myself, if I think the years I spent learning, I did teaching, and I just spent years
Yeah,
and years learning something that I ended up going, oh, I'm throwing all this away and I'm unschooling my kids. So it helped. But like you say, for your son to go and do 5 to 7 years and probably have most of that knowledge already, why can't he just
yeah,
find the things he needs? Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I did 5 years of psychology, and I can't say I learned nearly as much as in my first year of, researching human motivation for the purposes of understanding how self-directed education works.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
So,
it's something that other people maybe don't see because that's where they are focused, is the way things have always been. Yeah.
well, I'm actually busy putting together an ebook and a video series now on something I call C cubed, which is, for a number of years, I've been trying to identify what is it that's keeping the schools stuck? What is it that's making them problematic? Because in itself, it's not a problematic concept. And what they're trying to do is very, very good. And it's supposed to be a blessing. And I mean, if you look at the average child does not have the option to unschool or go to a very small learning community that's private and fee paying. To meet the needs of people in a public school system, we really need to figure out something better than we've got, because it's failing so many people and harming so many people. I mean, there's literally a graph that I'm using in my current course of a suicidologist who works in psychiatry, in emergency psychiatry in the wards in America. And he researched the suicide stats over the course of the American school year. And it plummets in the holidays.
Yeah.
And then it starts rising during the school terms. And you can even see a dip at Thanksgiving, even a short holiday.
Yeah.
It's like anytime the kids are in school, and Mondays and Tuesdays are your main suicide days.
Jeez.
It's just so clear. So I've been looking at what is it, because again, I do have a love for psychology and philosophy of education and all this. It's like, what exactly is it
Yeah.
that is the problem? What exactly do we need to change? Because changing curricula and putting in,
Yeah.
more guidance counselors, it's not really scratching the surface. So with the C cubed concept, I'm looking at the coercion into competition by cohort. It's a bit of a complicated thing, but I'll have something out on it soon. And the way I explain it is maybe more accessible when I've got more time to do it.
Yeah.
But we need to take that out, because it's this comparison that the kids have from the second they go in. My godson was actually my first wake up before I became a mother, because he used to love to draw, and we would draw together and tell stories of what we were drawing. And I think it was like a week, maximum 2 weeks, that he'd been in grade 1. And he was like, no, you must draw the tree. I was like, why? He was like, my trees are no good. I
Yeah.
was like, what? Your
Oh,
trees are no good.
yeah.
Where's this from? And that's the thing, is right from there, the children start being compared and graded against something that, who's deciding these things that they should be compared against and standardized? And it's soul destroying. It's actually motivation destroying. So yeah, a lot of my work has to do with really understanding motivation and resilience and figuring out, how do we take away the stuff that's destroying people's motivation and destroying their resilience? And how do we then allow for the things that truly allow education to be what education is supposed to be? Because education is supposed to be empowerment. It's supposed to allow you to move beyond your default circumstances and author your own life, right? How many people do we know who feel that way? I didn't feel that way until I was in my 42nd year.
Yeah.
And I was a top student and deputy head girl.
Mm.
And I spent until I was 42 trying to figure out what I was supposed to want.
Yeah.
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 Whereas
so
if I look at the long-term kids at Riverstone and it's like they know what they want.
Yeah.
They know what they want, they know what they don't want.
Yeah.
And
Because they're
they,
being asked every
they
single
move.
day, or there's space every single
Well, they
day.
haven't been
Sorry, I
asked.
interrupted
They've
you.
been
Yeah,
allowed to
they
explore
know.
and discover it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and allowed to try things and quit and try something else and stick with it. And, they've been able to. So interestingly, one of the biggest complaints of kids in the Sudbury system overseas who do then go on to tertiary, because it's a high proportion of them, especially in places where the red tape isn't in the way, because it's not the learning that stops the self-directed kids getting into tertiary, it's red tape that stops them getting in. So where there isn't much red tape, they just go in.
Yeah.
And their main complaint is their peers. They say, what are all these immature people wanting to get drunk and have sex when we're here to study?
Yeah.
And why don't they want to do the readings? And why are they trying to buy class? It's like, what? The kids from self thing that you do. And in fact, my dad helped co-found Riverstone Village because he was actually head of the counseling and careers department at Wits for 15 years. And that's why he helped co-found Riverstone Village.
Yeah.
Because he looked at this and he was like, these kids don't know what they want. They're wasting their parents' money. They're wasting their lifetime. Half of them, are qualifying and they're not working in what they're qualified in, regretting what they did, starting their lives off completely wrong. I mean, he started advising people and saying, look, at least take a gap year, please, before you start, minimum.
Yeah.
But I mean, a gap year compared to 12 years of, getting to find out who you are, there's no comparison.
No. And it's good to hear. Oh, we've got 5 minutes before it jumps us out of here, so we're fine. I always think it's just going to end all of a sudden. I think we've got this idea mainstream schooling has this idea of like building these kids up. And I mean, if I look through adverts of private schooling, and it's all about empowering and making children like confident and self-sufficient. And then I go into the systems and it's just not, it's not there. And I guess I want to ask you from your perspective, do you think it's because people literally don't know what that looks like because they haven't felt it?
Yeah.
Like that's,
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Because what did we go through? We went through CQ schooling ourselves. So we don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
We have literally been kind of trained to see that as being education. And then we struggle to say like, okay, well, where's the education? They didn't sit down. I can't see paperwork. How do we test them? And none of that is actually for the purposes of education. That is only for the purposes of bureaucratic control. It's not educational. Testing people all the time actually interferes with their motivation and their focus. It's not useful.
No. So I guess then if I can ask you from your perspective, since you're doing the advocacy work, if there's a parent watching this thinking, do I understand this or don't I? What is a step they can take to figure out for themselves what it would mean in their own lives? Like, what would you encourage them to do to like take that path?
So honestly, right now, I mean, that's a tricky answer because I don't want to just promote my own stuff. Very, very soon, there'll be a free public app up called the Cards Game. Okay. I'd go and start playing the cards game. You don't have to even use the app. You'll see from the app, you can figure out how to just do it yourself anyway. But that is about looking at our own needs and our own motivation as parents, as adults, because the way that we've been schooled and raised, we're out of touch with that. It's like if I take the average person in the street and I go, how competent are you feeling about your child rearing? They're going to go, eh? What do you mean? Right? Whereas if they think about it, they can say, Je'anna, I'm feeling a bit lost here. It's like, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing. So when this person next door asks me, is your child reading yet? And I get all defensive and frightened and I start trying to make my child read. Why am I doing that? Oh, it's because my competence card is down in the red. And now I know that, now I'm conscious of it. How can I lift it up into green so that I have the ability to say to this person, it's like, that's interesting. I'll look into that. Thank you for your feedback. And I can now change, learn, grow. I'm realizing, okay, I don't actually know how kids learn to read. Maybe I can find out. So we've been so schooled to expect somebody to guide us and spoon feed us. We don't realize that the resources are there. I can go and figure out what are the key things for learning to read. I can find out like that. I mean, I can also tell you, just, read to your kid every day. Make sure it's a connection activity. Make sure it's stories they love. Make sure it's social, because this is going to meet the needs for relatedness, right? And connection, which is the number one motivator. That is the single most important thing, is make sure they have access to text and that it's meaningful to them. And, from there shall all things come. It's not quite as simple as that, which is why I run a 9-month course as well. Yeah. But find out why you're feeling lost. Find out what your worries are, because otherwise you'll be acting on them and you'll be second guessing. And you need to be able to really listen to your child, because your child can feel what it is that they need. Self-direction is very powerful when it's not confused. The main thing we need to do is not confuse that self-direction by making the child want to please us and then like getting off track. But your child has got a pretty good idea of what their talents and skills and developmental readiness is. It's just not conscious. It's actually just right here. So, get to know your child. Don't say, oh, I'm not interested in listening about that. I don't share your interest. It's like you want to get to know your child. So you let your child bore you silly telling you about whatever it is. But if I've got to give one tip to get started, it's to understand the difference between a content and meta skills. So yeah, people will look at a child who's memorizing species of fish in the Atlantic, and they'll go, oh, that's so educational. They will look at a child who's memorizing all the Pokemon or all of the different blocks in Minecraft, and they will go, oh, they're just wasting their time. And they're not realizing that it doesn't actually matter what the content is. The kids their age in school who are memorizing X, Y, and Z are going to have completely flushed that content within a year, if not within a week. The point is they're developing a meta skill, which is I'm learning how to classify things. I'm learning how to memorize when I want to. I'm learning how things fit together, right? And conversation is one of the most powerful things in this world for developing meta skills. Your logical thinking, your critical thinking, your emotional intelligence, your executive function, your self-regulation. And what we're doing in the mainstream education system is we're conversation starving kids. You're not supposed to talk to your neighbor. You get half an hour break, then you go home and do your homework. You barely get to see your parents. You hardly have time to encounter anybody. Whereas I often say, self-directed education is very largely education by conversation. You want the widest possible array of conversation partners. Let your kids meet people you don't relate to. Yeah. Let your kids meet people they don't relate to and that they do, and let them also seek out. If they've got an affinity with somebody, encourage it. Make it possible for them to hang time with that person, and take them to go and ask whoever it is about their stuff. You'd be amazed how many people are out there who's so happy to talk about their passion in detail to a kid who's genuinely interested. The trick is, don't try and make your kid be interested. Yeah. Follow where their real interest is really leading. Yeah.
And it makes so much sense to hear it. I think it's hard for me personally to explain it to people. Like, we're living it, but how to explain that to like a person who is in the school mindset. But that also isn't always my place to have to do. Like, if people don't get it, that's also fine. Like, it's not my goal.
Yeah. So it's the same with adults as it is with kids. You know, if you're trying to teach somebody something and trying to fix them and change them, you're not going to get very far. You need to accept that somebody else's life is theirs and trust their self-direction and support when it works for you both that you're going to support, which is definitely with your own kids. Yeah.
I think I wanted to just say, like, as we finishing off, I would love for you to self-promote as much as you like, because I know you've got the info, you've been pioneering this, like, in our sort of area, and there's not a lot of people that people can go to ask this stuff. So if you don't mind sending me the links, I'm going to post it below so people can go check it out, see where they can get information. I think maybe just to finish off, is there anything else you want to add that we haven't touched on? Any words of wisdom, anything you can think of? I mean, you've shared so much, so no pressure.
Yeah, no, it's hard to choose because, you know, after 20 years, I could probably talk for a month. So it's hard to say. Just that I think that parents feel an enormous pressure to get it right, and we need to understand part of that is because of our own school experience, that we've got actually this trauma in our bodies around how bad it is to make a mistake. And now we've got this little person that we love so much that there's extra pressure. It's like, if I make a mistake that harms this person, you know, that feels unsurvivable. And then I'm being misunderstood by all these people and judged by all these people. And I've really got to get it right. So that enormous pressure, I think, is the main reason that we abandon our kids. And we slip and we lose our confidence, and we actually make the mistakes of not trusting our kids. So if we can do what we need to do for our own support and our own self-care, and as I said, understanding our own motivation and how to keep our own cards up, then that's when our bodies move into a feeling of safety, and then we're radiating that feeling of safety to our child. And then we can all experiment and explore together, because mistakes are learning experiences. You know, like Edison, who invented the light bulb, said, I never made a mistake. I just discovered 2,000 ways not to make the light bulb. You know, it's like every single mistake is a learning experience. Every crisis is an opportunity. The point is to learn and to grow, and we're going to do that together. So we're not getting our child to learn. We are learning and growing with our child, and they're guiding us at least as much, if not more, than we are guiding them.
I think that's such valuable words of wisdom. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for meeting with me and giving of your time. And yeah, I can't wait to look up all the stuff that you've mentioned, because I need to go see it as well.
Great. It's a pleasure and lovely meeting you, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you very much.